Joe Matthew.
All right, Charlie. Good to see Charlie Pellet at World Headquarters, and he will be back not too long from now to update the Tuesday trade here as we watch Bitcoin rise more than $2,000. It's a big move, almost 2% here. Back above 119,000, and I bring this up because crypto is in the air here in Washington, D.C. Remember, we just had Crypto Week. By the way, have I said Happy AI Week? We'll get to that in the second hour. The White House rolling out AI regs today. The Federal Reserve rubbing elbows with Sam Altman. But no, this is a crypto market structure bill, something you've heard us talk about called the Clarity Act. And the idea is that you pass the Genius Act, the stablecoin bill, and it would unlock new fortunes for the rest of the industry here. The problem is a lot of Democrats have an issue with crypto right now because of the president and his family's own personal financial involvement in the industry. But Senate Republicans are out with an initial discussion draft of the digital asset market structure legislation that we call the Clarity Act that passed the House last week. I guess they'll have their own name for it in the Senate. This is why we turn to our friend Nathan Dean. I'm glad we got through things at the White House so we could spend some time with the senior U.S. policy analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence. Nathan, great to see you. We start talking about a discussion draft. That doesn't really sound like something about to become law. Where does this actually stand?
Yeah, so this is the Responsible Financial Innovation Act. So
that's the real name.
Yeah, RFIA. But again, it's a discussion draft, so everything can change.
We need a better name.
And so, what we're telling our clients is, look, this is a discussion draft. This is the Senate Banking Committee. So the Senate Ag Committee still has to put their hands on this because remember, banking has authority over securities. Right. Ag has authority over commodities. Right. So this is work that they're doing to enhance the Clarity Act. And essentially what they're doing here is that they're creating this new form of ancillary asset. So you've got securities, you've got commodities, and now you have this ancillary asset. Now, the crypto world, most of them want to go to this commodity route because, and we agree with this, is that the CFTC would have much less onerous regulation than if you were in the securities world or with the SEC. But again, this is just a discussion draft. It's not great to release this right before you go on August recess, but, we do anticipate that, we will see some committee work in September while the government funding fights are going on. But we're telling our clients is, look, this needs a lot of time to cook. Yeah. And so I wouldn't be surprised if this gets pushed off to the first half of next year.
How much of that has to do with the fact that Democrats and Republicans seem to be reaching new lows when it comes to trust? There's talk already now about a potential government shutdown that I'm going to ask you about maybe at the end of September because of the clawbacks, the rescissions, the big, beautiful bill. Democrats keep this from happening?
So, when it comes to the crypto bill in particular, I just, there were some nuggets in this bill, the discussion draft, that made me think that the Republicans were trying to reach out to the Democrats and say, specifically on bank secrecy and anti-money laundering.
Okay.
But there's just not enough here that the Democrats can say, look, I'm very comfortable with this. Again, but I still think something can get done. I'm a little bit out of consensus on that. But I think this bill needs to actually be brought back a little bit and needs to be put in a way that the Democrats can say that whether it's the SEC or the CFTC, somebody at the regulatory agencies is spending a lot of time working on this. And I'm just not seeing it there just yet. But again, time can tell. And a lot of the other aspect of this is President Trump's ties to the crypto sector.
That's right.
Just Democrats are not going to be happy with that. And I'm not sure how you get past that.
So those are real headwinds right now. But assuming you see this happening, assuming it does happen, the argument is that you want to start buying Bitcoin and other crypto because it will then bring an institutional wave of buying. Is that actually something investors can bank on?
Well, let's look at the Stablecoin Act. The Genius Act passes last Friday, or, President Trump signs it into law. We were listening to bank earnings this week and last week, and there were a lot of banks out there that said, look, we're going to actually get into the stablecoin pace. Circle, for example, is down right now significantly, and I think a lot of it's based off of competition concerns. Wow. And so you're starting to see a lot of people saying, look, now that we have clarity, now that we know that we're not going to get hit with an enforcement action, we're now going to jump into this space. I think right now for the firms like Coinbase and Robinhood, they want this type of clarity. I'll be more than happy to pay for those compliance costs, if you will, for something like the Clarity Act to pass. So I think you will see more companies get into the fold, but then you'll see some consolidation as well.
We've already got ETFs though, right? We've got a Bitcoin ETF. That was a big deal when that first debuted. What else do we see? Companies, banks actually putting this in their treasury? What is it that puts this over the top? What form would it take?
Well, I think it's also let's start with the stable coins. The stable coins, in our view, is more of a back office function. Look, you're going to use your stable coin to conduct business transactions in the same way you would do FedWire, or you just take your phone and tap in and tap out. But when it comes to crypto, on the other hand, you're going to have Bitcoin as an asset that you eventually hold as either a gold reserve or a hedge against something, to take your pick. And so I think this idea is that, when you have 30,000 different types of cryptocurrencies out there, there's probably just going to be like 3 to 5 of them that really, really take off. I mean, it's just, but I think, again, institutional adoption, we saw this with the ETFs. Once they were approved, more people went into them. When you get to the idea that Goldman Sachs and the JP Morgans and the Michael Saylors are enhancing their Bitcoin treasuries, for a retail investor, that might be good news.
Does stablecoin actually increase the argument for Ethereum, since they're technologically related somehow, Ether and stablecoin? I realize Ethereum and Ether are two different things, but there's an argument right now that Tom Lee is forwarding, for instance, this is the next Bitcoin. This is the catch-up trade.
Well, I mean, look,
because of stablecoin.
Yeah, I mean, look, stablecoins are going to most likely enhance people's familiarity with crypto. If banks and non-banks really come out with a plethora of stablecoins in the next few years, you're going to see more people trying to get into cryptocurrency. And if it's not Bitcoin, Ethereum is the next one.
Sure.
You have Solana. And so, again, you go to this idea of who has the market, who has the open interest, if you will, right now, and it's Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Solana. So I definitely could see that argument, but again, time will tell.
So we have a DEA administrator, something that we've talked about a bit. Cloture went all right. It was a party line vote, 50-47 for President Trump's pick here, Terrence Cole, to run the DEA. And marijuana stocks have been moving on this because we've talked about this, some of the comments he's made about simply examining the idea of rescheduling cannabis. Promises on the campaign trail have not been kept when it comes to the legalization effort. What's this gentleman going to do with the DEA?
So there's a lot of hope right now amongst the marijuana investors, because if you look at like their index, I mean, it's almost just downhill since 2020. I mean, Brutal. We're talking significantly downhill. So a lot of retail investors in the marijuana space are hoping for this type of good news because these stocks, as we've talked about before, they jump up 10, 15, 20% on any type of news tidbit coming from Washington. But at the end of the day, what we've put, and we just put out a note to our clients, essentially saying is that we don't see any evidence from Terry Cole that he would actually support this. He's very anti-marijuana in his past role in the state of Virginia. And, again, we consistently hear the DEA staff are not on board with this. And so, yes, President Trump did say that he would look into this, but there's a big difference between looking into it and actually moving forward. I'm not going to say it's not going to happen, but just right now, I see no evidence that they're going to move forward with rescheduling.
It's interesting. The old MJ ETF is up almost 3% right now, just about to get back above $22. Investors think they know something. They're just trading on a headline. You're telling us better of it.
Well, there was a lot of chatter last week amongst the community that the reschedulization was imminent.
Yeah.
In fact, we saw some anti-reschedulization notices coming out from some of the anti-marijuana groups. So there must have been something going around that people thought that this was going to happen imminently. But, again, I just say that, Terrence Cole has said that he would look into it.
Yeah.
And I just haven't seen any evidence
that
he'd say that
like what he sees when he does, right?
Exactly.
That wouldn't be completely off brand. And as far as the White House goes, the president not asked about this. I haven't heard a peep from him on this issue since he's been in the White House. Have you?
Well, it pains me to say this because I like covering this issue, but it's not exactly the most important issue.
No, it turns out not to be.
So when you have things like tariffs and obviously, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, it's kind of hard to get marijuana FaceTime with.
You should hear some of the questions he gets, though, Nathan. I don't know. Sometimes it might actually be a little more important than what we heard about some of the interior decorating, for instance, in the Oval Office. Great to have you, as always, Nathan Dean. Find him, Bloomberg Intelligence, on the terminal and online.